I was thinking about what to talk about this week, and I found myself trying to find an old video on my Instagram page, and it brought me past all of these videos that I did back in 2020 during the lockdown. And so, of course, it made me just sit and reflect over the last 4 years. Can you believe that it's been 4 years? Wow. And just where I am now in comparison to where I was then. So I want to talk today about reflection and time, how time moves in such a weird way, where sometimes we feel like it moves so painfully slow. And then yet when things change in our lives, it really speeds up all of a sudden. And then you look back and think it was just a blip of time. But that process and what can come up in the plateau, what can come up when we feel confused and lost and disconnected or lonely or physically alone. Reflection, time, and as always, the relationship to ourselves in the process of it all. So I know I speak and I work a lot with singles, so I think also this element of loneliness or being alone or wanting something that hasn't come into our lives yet, and the waiting process. I think these are all maybe interesting things to dive into today. So let's see where it takes us. This is Corinne Bloom, and you're listening to Raw Conversations. So I just saw a quote that said something along the lines of, remember when you dreamt of being where you are now. And I was thinking about how that's certainly true for me on one level at least, maybe not entirely, but on one level it's very true. And I was thinking about how as a collective, we're very future orientated. The interesting thing is that from the perspective of the Enneagram, the different Enneagram types, some types are very future orientated and some types are actually past. And it's interesting that no type is present, isn't orientated in the present, and how that is the hardest place to be for humans. And yet that's all we have. That's the irony, right? That's all we have is the present moment. But some of us focus more on the future. Some of us focus more on the past. But I would say as a collective, we're pretty focused on the future. People can get very nostalgic and stuck and kind of in denial and all of these things, read the past, but actually there's so much focus and concern, whether it's I need to get there to achieve those goals. If I get that, then I'll be happy. Once I do this, then I'll be happy. There's a lot of just focusing on the future or like the fear of what the future will bring. And of course, the true wisdom is coming into the present moment. And I have to say, I might jump around with how I labeled this talk. I have to say the plateau, which is really sometimes the most challenging place to be, right? Because it's kind of the green room. It's the waiting space. It's the time where it feels like nothing is happening. It's when we're confused and we don't know what the next step is, and we might not have everything that we quote unquote want in our lives, and we're wanting to get there, but we're still somehow stuck here. It can feel so painful and so just so long, so enduring to have to go through. And yet there's something very interesting about the plateau because it's really inviting us to come into the present moment. So when I was looking at these videos on Instagram and, the lockdown where I was living was very severe, and I was either on my own or the days that I had my daughter. And for 2.5 months, just hardly saw a soul, another being, because I was in the middle of the countryside and the hay fields and there was nothing. Didn't even, every now and again, maybe I would see a tractor pass by, but when nobody was allowed to do anything, I remember taking a walk with my daughter around the corner on this white road where there are no houses, nothing. There's no one. Didn't see any single human being. And the police drove by and they're like, you need to go home. I'm like, oh, give me a break. So I was thinking back to that period of time and how, goodness, it was challenging, It was challenging. And yet that was the beginning for me of really, like, what I can say 4 years later is really mastering the art of being, the art of stillness without any distraction, the art of being alone. There have been times over the past 4 years, especially in the last 2 years, where I felt like my life wasn't moving ahead at all. And there was, what was it? It was Christmas of 2022, where I hit my first rock bottom. And I thought, wow, a year has gone by and nothing has changed. Nothing has changed in my life. And I thought, I can't do this anymore. And so that was really the beginning of really kind of being, in a way, determined. And this is the interesting thing about creating our lives and manifesting. And I found that manifesting is not, it doesn't work in the same way that it did 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. It works very, very differently. And I feel like I've been quite skilled at that in the past. And it's just, the laws are different. We are in a different paradigm. We're in a different frequency. So much has changed. So I'm figuring it out now, trying to. But the interesting thing about it is that it really is kind of half our own focus, our own vision, our own determination, our own clarity. And then I say half, but God knows what the actual, equation is or balance. But then I would say there's definitely its other half that is totally out of our control. I would say everything is out of our control. I think most of it is, can we trust the journey, knowing that we are co-creating it, but there is a force that's helping us. And actually, I find that the more I try to make it happen, the less it happens. The more I have a very clear intention, but then I really let it go, the more flow there is. But there's so many nuances, and I don't think there's a one size fits all. And I think it really is dependent on where we are in our journey. And I think the biggest question is, not the biggest question, the biggest point that I hear a lot is that from a universe perspective or from a higher self perspective, we're often given what we need, not what we want. And sometimes really there is a kind of quote unquote divine timing around things. Sometimes we're not ready yet. Sometimes other people in our lives that might be included in the process aren't ready yet. So when I'm working with singles, I remind them, you want the person that you're bringing into your life to also be ready. You don't want to call them in too soon. I've done that. I did that in the past when I was younger. And believe you me, it wasn't easy. So really trusting, and it made me think of, I think Lee Harris said it, of like, what if, like, are we really, truly trusting our journey? And I would say I have a large amount of self-awareness around the process and the journey. Do I trust it all the time? No, I don't think so. I think I come in and out of it. And maybe it's this dance between when I'm connected to my higher self, or you could say my soul self, yes, I could fall into that place of trust and really stepping into the unknown. And then when I go into my kind of more human ego self, that's the part that's like, well, I want to know. I want the clarity. What's the next step? What's the answer? I talked about this, I think, last week or the last couple weeks. I think that's an ongoing theme in our lives. And I think it's a bit of a dance, and it doesn't need to be segregated between, oh, I'm my soul self and my human self, because there has to be integration. It's a relationship, right? So it shouldn't be seen as separately, but sometimes it's interesting to just acknowledge, okay, when am I coming? I talk a lot in parts, and some people hate those terms. They don't like, oh, parts, it makes me feel broken or fragmented. I don't see it as that. I see it as we are a whole being, but there are different parts of us that have different needs and different perspectives and different experiences. And what's helpful about speaking in parts is that when you understand that you are, again, the analogy that I've always used, that I created, was the soul part of you, the essence of who you are, is the canvas. That's the canvas that will forever be there. the paint the picture that you create, that you might change because of the different colors of paint, and you might slap that on and then shift that. And you know how painters work. I have a friend who's a painter and is constantly adding different layers and taking apart, and it's changing and morphing and evolving. That's experience, that's feeling, that's emotion, that's life, right? But the canvas is always underneath it all. And that is the essence, the soul of who we are. And I think I might have touched upon this last week. Time is moving at a very different speed where I am right now, so forgive me. But I think we're really being asked to come into a more feminine place of receptivity. Now, it's not about going too far into the feminine. This is really a time of recalibration and rebalancing, harmonizing our being, coming into a healthy feminine and a healthy masculine, and the integration of both. I love the indigenous symbol of the bird with two wings, like in this kind of very, I don't even want to call it a masculine phase that we've been going through, because I feel like it hasn't been the divine masculine. So it almost needs a word of its own. But they've used the analogy of like a bird flying with one wing that's just been flying in circles. And so now we need both wings to create harmony, to create balance, and for us to really soar. And I think as we're moving into more heart-centered places, or more heart-centered focus, more love, more compassion, a higher frequency that's coming through, all the more that we're being invited to be receptive, to listen. So not so linear, not so going for the goal that has been primarily left brain and very masculine, very future-based. It's really asking us, be here now. And if you're not here now, there's a lot of things that come in that will force you to be here now. And I think I talked about this last week. It's like we have to be in that point of stillness before we can create motion. So I look back at the last 4 years and go, God, there were times that just felt so arduous, that felt so painful, that felt so isolating and lonely and frustrating, and my life was just wasting away. And it was really hard. And I thought, wow, what if this is it? What if this is it for the rest of my life? And so I was dreaming of, I just thought it's going to be a miracle. It's going to be a miracle when I can move out of the house that I was in and move away from the area and just have a totally different experience. I mean, it literally felt like it would take a miracle. And then a miracle did come in. And my life changed, from like 180 degrees within less than 2 months, maybe 2 months. And so I was thinking about this quote of there was a time where you were dreaming to be where you are now. And so because we're so future oriented, we might get to that point that we were dreaming, but we already are thinking about the next future point, that we forget to stop and reflect. We forget to just stop and go, oh yeah, right. I was hoping to be here, and I am here now. And the gratitude of that. Gratitude is such a beautiful way of pulling us into the present moment. It's also a great way of, if your present moment is difficult, it's a wonderful way to tune you into the parts that are beautiful in your life right now. And just to keep us a little, it's like, whoa, steady. I'm thinking about horse in the reins. We just want to gallop. And that's a beautiful feeling. But actually the irony is sometimes if the horse runs too fast, it's overwhelming, it gets tiring. And so much about life is also about pacing. And time moves at a very odd speed because it can go really slow. And then when something happens, it speeds up. It speeds up and it catches up, and you look back and you go, oh, that was no time at all. But if I were to talk to my former self, she would say that was one of the hardest periods of my life. It felt like it was never going to change. It felt never ending. I felt like nothing was possible. And a lot of people get quote unquote depression, which in my mind, depression is when your spirit feels depressed. It feels weighted down. Depression, so I'm going off on a tangent, but I think it's an important one to speak to. When people feel depressed, it's often actually an invitation to reflect. This is going to tie in with reflection. Reflect on your life. What is it that you need to process? What is it that you need to listen to? What is it that you need to give love to? What is it that you need to change? Maybe it's a redirect. It's a reflection and then a redirection. Because our body and our being and our higher self is so incredibly wise. It's never going to lead us astray. It wants for us to be happy. It wants for us to go in the right direction, but it's not going to interfere. It's not going to interfere and do it for us. It will do it with us, but we have to be willing. We have to be willing. We have to ask for the support. We have to be present. But this also ties into what I've been speaking to, that I've been going through, is that also we have to stretch ourselves beyond our comfort zone. But there is a radical trust that needs to happen in all of this, the timing of it, and to understand that whatever we're going through, it might not be what we want, but it might be exactly what we need. So again, I look back at the last 4 years, I look back at these videos and I think, wow, I really went through a massive internal journey, like really big time. And I feel like I've been on so many internal journeys, I can't even tell you, throughout my life. I feel like that's been quite a theme. And I look back and I can actually say, you know what, I'm grateful for it. I'm really grateful for it. It was damn hard. It was damn painful at times, but I'm grateful because of the richness of being that it gave me, that I feel so much more grounded and at home within myself. And then I think that's what gives me the legs to go off and do new things as I'm doing now. You know, that feels like I'm in a totally altered reality. I am. I've literally changed my life completely. I think I wrote about this the other day, that it was kind of like, not that I play video games, but it was literally like, I'm going to take this game out of the PlayStation and I'm going to put a different one in, you know, and of course I'm still the same person, I'm the same character, but it really feels like that. So the moral of the story for me, at least, was, you know, everything. I love the saying, hindsight is 20/20 vision. We can't see it when we're in it, but when we can reflect back on it, it makes sense. There was another saying, I don't know who said it, that was something that life is lived forwards, but understood backwards. And it's like, yeah, that's so it. When we're in it, sometimes we don't have a freaking clue. And then when you look back on it, you go, oh, okay. Okay, I get it now. I get why I had to go through that. It was the same when I was younger, in my 20s, and I had this injury for 7 years that took me away from my career, and I just was like angry. I was like, what the hell? What the hell is going on? You know? And it was hard and painful, and it was a struggle and lots of suffering, and it was scary and it was confusing. And that 7-year period gave me the foundation of everything that I feel like I have now, both that I'm able to offer myself, but I'm able to offer my clients. It gave me an immense amount of wisdom. It gave me an immense amount of understanding of how our body and being and our emotions work. And even just this whole construct and paradigm around, you know, we are what we do, and how that is such a fallacy. And you know, I can look back and go, yeah, it makes 100% sense. And now I can even look back on these last 4 years and go, yeah, I get it. Would I want to do it again? No. I wouldn't want to do neither one of them again. But am I glad that I went through it because of what I've gained now? Yes. So again, the moral, or the invitation, or the point of reflection is trust whatever you're going through. Because actually, as annoying as it might be to hear, it is happening for a reason. We just don't always know it in the moment. It doesn't make sense until after the fact. And we just have to kind of trust the timing. Now, here's the other thing that I will just throw into it. I do think as human beings, we can be lazy and we can be apathetic. I think we can go into that place where we kind of give up. And guess what? Nobody's going to come in and make it better for us. Just nobody. It's just not going to happen. Because like I said, our higher self, our guides, our soul, they want to support us, but we have to be willing. We have to initiate. The spirit speaks to us in energy, but our physical form, our gift, the gift of the physical form is action. So we have to take an action, even if that action might not look like a physical doing, but it's an awareness. It's a state of consciousness that says, okay, I'm present, I'm alive, awake, I'm paying attention, I'm listening, I'm tuning in, I'm being with. It's not just sitting on the couch and watching Netflix all day. Because you can do that and your life can pass you by. And if that's how you want to choose to live your life, that's fine. But if any part of you, there's no judgment, there's no good, bad, right, wrong, right? It's all an experience. But if that's not fulfilling for you, if that feels like life is disappointing and it's not happening the way you want it to, it's because you're not engaging, and you have to engage. We have to engage. We have to meet the other half, whatever the other half is. We have to meet it. We have to sit at the table and go, okay, I'm here, I'm present, I'm going to have the conversation with you. And then when we're in conversation and we're in tune and we're listening and we're trusting and letting go, we're not pushing it, we're not forcing it, we're not controlling it, we're receiving it, we're surrendering to it, but we're engaged with it. That's when life has more breathing room and more momentum and more flow. And even, when we say flow, we think forward movement, right? But flow sometimes is also just being at peace with what is. So it might be a very, very slow flow. I remember, it just reminded me of this memory of when I was maybe 12 years old and I was on a school trip and we were meant to be kind of canoeing down this river and there was hardly any water. This was in California. And so the water was literally moving at a snail's pace. And so it was so hot, and you'd paddle for a certain amount of time and then you get tired and then you just drift, but very slowly. But you could still say the river is still flowing, just very, very slowly. And sometimes we have those moments in life where it's going very, very slowly. When it feels like there are obstacles, I found that it could be one of two things. One is we're getting in our own way and we're resisting. Resistance is the biggest obstacle, our own resistance. And so that takes being with, right? Listen to it, be with it, have compassion. Why is there resistance? What are you scared of? Again, it's always about listening to our inner being and giving ourselves what we need. The other thing that can come up is sometimes the obstacle comes up because it's a redirect. It's like going through the labyrinth and you hit a dead end. It just means you need to turn a different direction. You're still moving towards the center, but sometimes there really is a need for the redirect. So again, it comes back to this, can you trust the process? Can we trust the process? So profoundly that we let go of the fear of where we think it should go, where it needs to go, even where we want it to go. And that is probably much more likely that what you're wanting will come in if you let go of trying to make it happen. Again, there's no one size fits all. I think, as I say always, it has to resonate for you. Take it or leave it as feels right for you is what I always say at the end of every episode, because it has to feel true for you. And that sometimes takes some inquiry, because I've had some clients that say, God, I have friends that just were on dating apps all the time and they were just making it happen and dating all the time. And then they met someone. And that's great. For others, that doesn't work at all. At the end of the day, I think it's trusting what feels true for you, what feels authentic for you. I think this piece around authenticity is actually so extremely important. And I listened to a woman speak. I thought this was very interesting. She was saying our two biggest needs are authenticity and attachment. And so she must have been some kind of a relationship coach or therapist as well. And she was saying a lot of people will give up their authenticity for attachment. And that's a big mistake, because that's when that person will change who they are to fit into this person's life. Or if I do this, then they'll like me. And that's never sustainable, because at some point you're going to get tired and you just want to be who you are. You want to just be loved for who you are. But if you're not showing up as who you are, there's going to be a collision at some point. It doesn't work. So she was saying, if you have to give up one, give up the attachment and stay true to your authenticity. And I have to agree with that, and that's why doing the inner work is really important, because you don't want to be coming from a place where you don't feel comfortable in your authenticity to just really show up as you are and trust that someone's going to love you for who you are. And that's true for a romantic relationship, for friends, for a job. If there's a lack of self-worth, a lack of connection to your self-worth, because your self-worth is innately there, then people will try to people please or bend over backwards or just act differently than who they are for the job, for the friendship, for the relationship. And it just doesn't work. And I just think life doesn't work so well that way, because as I think it was Jung that said, the greatest gift of a lifetime is to be who you truly are. There's only one you. There's only one expression of you. Why would you want to be anybody else? And why wouldn't you believe that being you will be loved? It will be loved. It will be loved by the right person that is in resonance and harmony with you. And when we're in our authenticity, there is a greater flow because we're following our truth. We're following our true essence. And if we are just a vibration and a frequency, we're matching up with the right tune. And if we're in the right tune and the right melody, then we will attract things that will harmonize with that. That's how music works, right? Otherwise, it sounds awful. But we've got to be playing our tune in order for things in life to harmonize with us, with that sound, that tune, that tone. So the invitation today is come back and reflect. Come back to the now. Reflect on, even if you feel nothing has changed, you have gained something. You have learned something. You will have a point of reflection where you can go, oh, wow, yeah, maybe it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years ago, who knows? But I always say to my clients as I'm doing a process with them, you have to stop along the way and see how far you've come. It's funny, I know that this person is going to listen to this podcast, and it reminds me of back in 2005, because she's doing this, and I did this back in 2005. I climbed a volcano in Bali, and you have to get up at a stupid hour in the middle of the night, and you walk up in the dark, and you have no idea where you're going or what your surroundings look like. You're totally having to trust your guide that you only see the back of, you've got a torch on your head. This is so metaphoric of life, isn't it? You're just taking step by step, one foot in front of the other, and you got to pay attention because it's not like a nice smooth path. There's lots of stones and rocks, and you're going up the whole time, and it feels like forever. It's literally hours and hours. And then you reach the top, and the sun starts to come up, and it's misty, and you see the sun come up, and there's like a monkey on the edge there. And then the sun fully comes up, and you go, oh my God, I just climbed up that. I had no idea what I was climbing up. And then you see the view, and then the sun rises, and you're like, oh, and it's spectacular. That's life sometimes. We haven't a fucking clue where we're going. We're in the dark. There's a guide, but you can't quite see him or her, it. And you're having to really take, excuse me, one foot in front of the other. And sometimes it's smooth, and sometimes it's rocky. And sometimes it's scary, and sometimes you're okay, and you don't know where you're going to get to. You don't know what it's going to look like. But when you arrive, it's not just the beauty of what you're seeing around you, but it's the accomplishment, or not even the accomplishment, the experience that you went through, not knowing. It's just it's so beautiful and so special, and something that is just, we shouldn't underestimate that in the journey of life. So I can hear there are voices in the background. I'm sorry that it's not the same kind of recording quality as when I was back at home, so please forgive me. But I'm going to leave it on that note because I think that's a beautiful metaphor to leave it on. So trust the journey. Trust the journey. As always, take it or leave it as feels right for you, and loving you from afar. You've been listening to Raw Conversations with Corinne Bloom. Thanks so much for showing up, listening in, and being a part of the conversation with me.